Okay. Thank you. Those of you who saw me playing with my phone, I wasn't actually goofing off. I was trying to find this article that I wanted to start out by mentioning. This is breaking news. I was reminded of this a second ago. On Tuesday, this article came out. It was from a conference, I think it was here in DC, the Association for the Advancement of Science, and it shows the interdepartmental or interdisciplinary interests in all this. Two criminologists did a presentation where they'd been studying brain research. You know where I'm going. And this is international news. I'm reading the report from The Telegraph, the paper in the UK. Researchers believe that violent tendencies have a biological basis and that tests and brain imaging can pick them up in children as young as 3. Yeah. That's where we began.
I'll just rock quietly over here. Fetal position. Right, exactly.
Right. So I just want to make a few points before we open it up to conversation. I think it's important, as Jennifer said, it's wonderful that we have this new knowledge coming out. And again, I've also been in meetings where people see the brain, the one that rotates and you got colors, and especially when it's animated and the colors fire. And I once walked up to a researcher at one of these meetings and I said, you know, you've persuaded me that people who take drugs have brains that are more purple than other people. I think purple was the code. And I said, but can you tell me how I would know if I had a purple brain? If I was suffering the effects of this and my brain was beginning to fire differently, how would I subjectively know that? And he looked at me for a long time and he said, well, I think you'd always be on the verge of doing something. I don't know how good this guy was, but that's as deep as I got, right? But I don't know about you, but when I sit in these meetings and I hear people talk about brain functioning and cognition and thinking skills, I start to get really creeped out by all this stuff. It's true. We were talking before about our intellectual ancestry and who we trained with, and I mostly was trained in and sat through classes that were sociology and social work and social services. So I mainly think about how behavior and organizational systems to respond to behavior fit within the larger social structure and how we define things. And it's hard for me to turn that lens off when I'm hearing people talk about behavior. And it's important that we have this brain science coming out. And I like Jennifer's 2 points. Well, the one that said it makes evidence more real. On her slide, she used the term laypersons, and I took that as a synonym for elected officials. I don't know.
I can neither confirm nor deny that right now.
But it is important that people, and I think we do. Over the past 10 years, I think if you met county commissioners, state legislators, people at the federal level, it's more understood now and more accepted that intellectual development, cognition, and especially the maturity of judgment does not suddenly happen when the state legislature decides to define someone as an adult for the purposes of criminal prosecution. It is a biological thing, it's a developmental thing, and people go at different rates, but it's certainly not surprising that people at the ages of 18, 19, 20, 21 are not fully formed, and they don't have all the characteristics we think of as adult cognitive functioning. And that's important that we all know that, because we need to know who we're dealing with when we're trying to work with an adolescent, trying to affect them, trying to change their behavior, and help them navigate their way through the period of adolescence to get to adulthood. That's a very challenging thing, and I'm sure all of us remember having gone through all those challenges. And it's important we know who they are and know what their world is like. But that doesn't mean that brain scans and pictures of purple brains point us in a direction to intervention, or to even to understanding what got this person in our office, what got this person arrested and brought them in. And the real danger to me is that all of this science and all of this knowledge implicitly makes us think that we now understand the formation and development of criminal behavior, and here it all is. It's all in thinking errors and brain development. Because I think it's important for all of us to remember that crime is a social definition. It's behavior that we don't tolerate as a society, and then we impose our organizational power, the power of the state and our bureaucracies and organizations, to try to change that behavior. But as everything in America, it comes with a little bit of racism, a lot of class bias, disregard for poverty and environment. There are all those social factors that come along with that. And it's important that we not just think, oh, now we understand it's about thinking errors and brains. And the problem with this is I think we all should remember the wise words or the wise caution of the pop star from the 1980s named Thomas Dolby, who had a song called Blinded by Science. And it's important that we not become blinded by science, that we remember that these are scientific findings and we're helping to understand something, we're developing more knowledge, but there's not a direct translation into what we should do. It is important that we pay attention to evidence. And Ed talked about, everyone has a theory of what causes crime. And I have stories just like his. I've learned not to answer the question when taxi drivers say, what brings you to, and then name the town. And I don't give them an answer because then I get 10 minutes of theorizing and homespun remedies, and most of them include the phrase, they need a good knock upside the head. So everyone has a theory. And so once you start departing from the standard of real evidence, of course, you're opening yourself up to everyone's homespun remedies, and that's bad. But hewing too closely to what we consider evidence is also blinding, because evidence in our society is purchased. It doesn't arise naturally. There's not, Bill Gates isn't out there funding all this research to try to find out what causes crime and how to work with young people. People make decisions about where to invest in the search for evidence, and we only find high quality evidence when we pay for it. But if you think about the evidence as a pyramid or a triangle, and it goes from the base, which is everyone's homespun remedy and common sense notions and things they thought up while they were taking a shower, and then you go above that, and there might be studies that are based on qualitative narratives, experience. You go above that, and you have something we might call quasi-experimental designs, where we look at one group of kids and compare them to another group that's sort of similar, but it's not controlled very well. And at the very top of the pyramid are random assignment studies, experimental designs with replicated implementation, implemented in multiple places with multiple populations where the findings are robust and they hold up. That very top of the triangle is very expensive. It's very expensive to do those kind of studies, and it's where most of what we talk about when we say evidence-based programs comes from. And to get to the top of that triangle, it's a competition. Researchers are competing, program sites are competing, everyone's trying to attract grant dollars. We don't spend a lot of money on research on this issue in this country. And so to get the few dollars that are available is a competition. And again, when I said in America, things always come with a little bit of racism, a lot of class bias. Who wins those competitions? Well, if your theory of change, if your theory of working with young people involves community-based solutions, you're not going to win that competition. You win the competition when your solution fits the dominant culture. And the dominant culture around crime and justice right now is people are involved in crime because there's something wrong with them, they're defective, they have thinking errors, they have bad brains. So if your proposal comes in to a place like NIDA or NIH, and it sounds very sciencey and it's all about brain function, you have a greater chance of ending up in the top of that pyramid. With very few exceptions, do people who have a more social structural approach to crime get to the top of the pyramid. So if we only shop for policies from the very top of the pyramid and have this standard that we only look at evidence that's backed up by these random assignment studies, we're in trouble. But it's a tension you have to live with, because if you abandon the standards of science, then you're back to asking the cab driver what we should do. So the best way to go about this is to be aware of how rigorous the evidence is, but not to be blinded by science and not to have this bright line where something's either evidence or it's not. But that's a difficult thing to do in our culture. And the last thing I want to say is, and again, I go back to hearing Ed this morning. I like his presentations. He's an entertaining guy. But when he goes through, he dismisses all this stuff about the conventional thinking. So you ask me what keeps someone out of crime, and I'm still going to say a job, a place to live, and all these like basic social supports. So there's no evidence for that. He says it's crap because there's no good science behind it. And to dismiss something like physical activity, like how could we not accept the premise that being healthy is good? That having physical activity, having a good diet, everything else, how could we reject that because we don't have any random assignment studies behind it yet? Well, he goes through his list of things that he thinks we should focus on, and these are my own translations of them, but things like unrealistic sense of one's own power and value, a lack of empathy for others, disregard for other people's pain, impulsiveness, disregard for conventional rules and norms, and a sense of invulnerability. That might be correlated with the probability that you'd be a criminal, or it'd be correlated with the probability that you'd have an excellent career on Wall Street. The very things, taking advantage of others, disregard for other people's pain, all these are things that our society rewards unless you choose to use them in pursuit of a goal of which we disapprove. So it's a social construction, and again, that doesn't tell you exactly what to do with a 15-year-old in your office, but it's important that we not lose sight of that and not be blinded by science and be too simple-minded about all these things. Thank you.